Deep dive number 2 for F125 has just dropped, and it's focused on customization and authenticity. So we're going to find out what's new in this year's game, also confirmation of a few new features. Now before we get into it guys, if you haven't seen the previous breakdown that I made of the previous deep dive, over 30 minutes long, we went into every single detail from the article, the trailer, and even some inside info. I'll leave that video on screen now. Go click on it and go check it out before we jump into this one. Now we begin with visual authenticity. Basically in the trailer it was confirmed we have 5 circuits entirely remodeled this year. So Bahrain, Miami, Melbourne, Suzuka, Imola have all been updated with LiDAR or LiDAR scanning, bringing it hopefully much more closer to its real life counterparts. Hopefully those 5 tracks are going to be really good. Again, I mentioned it in other videos, past videos. It's a shame there's not more, considering they're making a big thing out of this as a feature this year, but this is a trend that we tend to get with Codemasters EA, and that's features tend to arrive half-baked. More on that later. Now they're pretty much saying that the LiDAR scanning is going to allow them to get an incredible amount of detail every pebble, curb, bump in the road, so hopefully we'll feel that in game. Also benefits to trees, foliage. Realistically, we don't particularly care about this too much. You can see the cherry blossoms, which were mentioned in the trailer at Suzuka, and also just the paddock environments, all these things, but all we care about is the black stuff. It does say, outside of the LiDAR circuits, other improvements have been made to several other circuits in the game. Bumps that were present at Silverstone in F124, such as those on the Wellington Straight and before Turn 1, have been smoothed out to better match a real-world surface. So hopefully that's going to be the case as well at other tracks. Australia had a fair few bumps as well. I do understand there's also some limitations, because a lot of the times we would hit those bumps because we're running a very aggressive, esports style, super low ride height setups, and you have to kind of do that. But Bahrain on the pit straight, running it all the way up to the pit wall, all those things hopefully should be fixed. So now we get to this weird text, and actually it's lights out and away we go in reverse, because yep, we're talking about reverse tracks. Now for the first time ever, this is a thing. As it mentions, we're going to get to race our favourite races in a unique way. It does confirm Silverstone, Zandvoort and the Red Bull Ring are available in a reverse track layout setting, and you can race them in Grand Prix Time Trial Multiplayer, My Team and Driver Career, those career mode ones from your second season onwards. So season 1 is a default circuit. I'm guessing Portimao will still be in the game as well as an additional circuit. Now quickly, just to go over this, I mentioned before, half-baked features. This is what Codemasters and EA do. It's their trademark. I mentioned this in the very first trailer that we got, where they showcased those tracks in reverse for a glimpse, and I said I wouldn't be surprised if that's all we get. There's no actually other tracks in reverse available, and this basically confirms it. So here's the thing, I kind of understand and I can accept their reasoning because of the following. It says, this isn't a case of just turning the cars around on the starting grid. On top of the AI, drivers needing to be retrained entirely in reverse, you'll notice every detail of a typical Grand Prix has been adapted for racing in reverse. So this is going to include subtle changes that you may not notice and do make a big difference, such as brake marker boards, start lights, off-track cameras, replays, grid boxes, even marshals and flag wavers. And I would go one more than that and say potentially commentary lines, VO, and maybe radios and other little things here and there. So I do think that's important, especially it says pit lanes in particular required special attention, because now you're going to be entering from what was the exit and you'll be rejoining on what was the entry basically. So it's the other way around, and pit entries aren't designed to be exited, right? So when you're rejoining into the race, into the traffic, that's a different dynamic. And then also it says, plus with the optimal racing line deferring when racing in reverse, you'll see that the track surface wear lines and also how drawing lines form in the wet have changed too. So I can understand this. It's basically, even though it's the same track environment, when you're reversing it to make it fully functional for Grand Prix Online, league racing, whatever it may be, they have to do all the due diligence and all the things that come with it, all the details, and for them to be fully playable you have to do these things. So I can actually understand it's a bit of a trial. They've done 3 tracks. If it does well, I'm assuming they'll do more. Even still, I'll say it's a half-baked feature because they could have at least done maybe 6 tracks, you know, out of 24. I think that's a fair number. I think that's a fifth. To be fair, 6th is actually a quarter of the calendar, so ignore my math on that one. And I'm not even saying this, you know, for the video, to be honest. I'll be critical when I have to be, and, you know, I'll praise when need be. And I'm genuinely excited for this. I think it's actually a very exciting thing. It's like getting 3 new tracks, genuinely, because the experience will be very different. Right, now we get into some more juicy stuff. Introducing the decal editor. Now, this is new, of course, taking a leaf from F1 Manager, basically. More creative freedom in terms of the cars. So customizable liveries now start with a base pattern that you'll be able to personalize with sponsor decals. Now, I do want to pause here because very important, again, going back to the half-baked features, okay? Customizable liveries now start with a base pattern. This is key. Depending on how many options we get with this and what level of creative freedom we get, that is going to dictate the latter, which is, you know, you'll be able to personalize with sponsor decals, because let's say the baseline liveries are crap. It doesn't really matter how much you can personalize sponsor decals if there's no real flesh on the bones. So very important to, again, considering they like to half-bake features, this is an important caveat. They do go on to basically, you know, recap that sponsor placements in the past have been locked to, you know, fixed positions, but this year we've got more freedom and we can move them, rotate, resize, and design variants unlockable throughout the game, which also is a nice little touch. And, you know, special dedicated liveries for that sponsor. Also, driver numbers are getting a visual overhaul, much like I'd say the MotoGP games. New fonts and colors allow additional personality to be shined through in your design when creating liveries for my team and F1 World. So yeah, also little fun factor, you can even choose to have different style of number on different parts of your car. So I'm guessing we're not just restricted to the nose and the shark fin. You can also put them, say, on the side pod, you know, a la old school racing cars. And here it says sponsor liveries will debut in F1 25. So again, it's kind of like a preset that you know have of certain sponsors in game. You can see it says these are more detailed base patterns for your car built around the visual identity of the many fictional title sponsors in the game. By using the decal editor to add more sponsor decals, you can create a car that wouldn't look out of place on the real life grid. So it does say in this year's Rebuild My Team mode, these title sponsors affect income potential, which in turn affects team size and spending. So building a relationship over time with a single sponsor can unlock additional rewards, including owner XP and new decal variants. Now, I mentioned this in the last deep dive as a bit of an inside information exclusive, but basically there is like a loyalty bonus in the game with certain sponsors in my team this year. So it makes a lot of sense. The best example I can give you is, let's say, BWT with, you know, F1 historically, whether that's Racing Point or Alpine. The more you basically sell yourself to that livery's, you know, custom fantasy sponsor look, the more they're going to pay you. So it depends on how much you want to keep of your own identity on the team car livery, or if you want to just make as much money as possible and essentially sell yourself out to sponsors. Simple as that. Now, I don't quite fully understand what this means, but it does say special edition liveries that are added to the game will now be applied to the car they represent, rather than the F1 World car. Again, I'm guessing that means if McLaren drop a special livery, that's going to only apply to McLaren, not to the F1 World car, so that won't be available for us to use in my team or, you know, F1 World. That's how I understand that. It then talks about state-of-the-art tech, where basically it's showing how path tracing, which is a new thing for PC this year, is going to work in the game. Essentially expanding on the ray tracing technology, which is now available as Ultramax in the graphic settings, which, by the way, these trailers look really good, but nobody can run Ultramax graphics. Like, you need the best computer running to run F1 at Ultramax settings. Like, it's not really realistic. Either way, I have seen path tracing in the beta, and I have tried it. Obviously, I can't comment on it, but it's a new, basically, visual aid, which is shown in the trailer. Right, we're going to cut to the chase. There's a lot of F1 World waffle here, which I really don't care about. I don't play F1 World, I don't touch it, I have no interest in it, so we're going to skip along. So it says, listen up, an upgraded audio experience throughout the game will bring you even closer to the action, both in and outside of the cockpit. So, first things first, I had a massive issue personally with F124 and the way they replaced the audio system, basically replacing the in-game audio with real-life noise. Don't get me wrong, the real-life audio is fine. The issue is there was not enough audio samples, it was highly inaccurate, and just didn't really work for me. So I just hope they've basically doubled the amount of audio samples if they're going to run with this direction, so that basically you're going to get a much more consistent and realistic experience with the audio in the kind of replay offboard shots, for league racing, and hopefully it gives a better experience. It says qualifying now benefits from real-world driver dialogue over the radio, alongside drivers occasionally addressing the race engineers. So I actually like this. Look, I thought the post-race team radio and also the start of the race team radio, little things here and there on the formation lap, were a nice little touch. It's a little touch of authenticity and realism, but there needs to be a lot more. And they have mentioned they've basically doubled the sound bank. So hopefully we get a bit more. It does say you may encounter some new radio for sequences, for pole positions, flags, and also from team principals. And then it does say they've doubled their pool of real driver voice lines since F124. So that's good to see. Naomi Schiff has been added as like a pundit, expert on top of Alex Jakes, David Croft, Natalie Pinkham, Anthony Davidson. So hopefully we get, again, that all gets fleshed out some more, because it does add to that element of realism.
Okay, looks like you've escaped unscathed, so head down now, yeah? Let's go.
Let's go, baby. You're the best race engineer ever.
That is the first official pole since Austria. Well done. That was a mighty qualifying. Well done, mate.
I had to back off last corner now.
Yes, and it's so unfortunate to see, because we know that a driver's job, their first job, is to beat their teammate. And in this case, they're not even matching them.
The man from Monaco is celebrating once more. A sensational drive being rewarded for Charles Leclerc.
Look, Max has been world champion for the last 3 seasons and he's looking like he'll make it a 4th. He's the best in the world right now.
Hello, Mathis, head of your engineering facility. Let's discuss where we think we are in terms of car performance.
Now we get to some interesting details. Handling and AI. This is buried at the bottom of the article and wasn't really mentioned much in the trailer, if at all. So, handling revisions. Through a combination of rigorous internal tests and feedback gathered from the community, esports drivers and the EA Creator Network members, there's been some changes made. So here's a summary of what they've done. Now, controls. For those of you who play on a controller, you'll notice that the track conditions and the car's unique dynamics give a more intuitive feel to steering, allowing you to better understand the limits of grip. Also, we've tuned the steering rate for a more consistent feel of the car at all speeds. Okay, I don't play controller, but if you do, hopefully that's valuable info for you. For wheel users, force feedback settings have been reviewed across a wide range of wheel models with the goal of a more authentic feel. Specifically, improvements have been made for more informative aligning, torque, and changes that better communicate oversteer, breakaway when racing. So essentially, understanding snaps on the back end when putting power down, and understanding the torque curve when you're putting the power down on the throttle. So we'll see what happens. F124, traction wasn't really much of an issue, to be honest, so we'll see what they've done exactly with that. Elsewhere, they do mention they've made changes to the full traction control setting for better stability and less restrictive driving, which, to be fair, I have noticed when I've had my mates around before. When you run full traction, you just feel like you're really capped in terms of what you can do. Then we go to tyres, which have had a lot of work done to them, including adjustments to tyre loads and tyre slip model, particularly in time trial, which, look, I'll say this. Time trial doesn't really matter much, but nobody practices in time trial anymore for league racing because the conditions, the tyre slip, the tyre feedback doesn't correlate at all to Grand Prix mode or online. So there's no point practicing for a league race in time trial because the track feel, the car feel, the tyres is completely different. So hopefully this brings it all a bit more in line. Rapid steering inputs such as techniques that rely on flicking will be less effective on race days as a more aggressive driving style will result in overheating the tyres and faster wear. So they haven't removed it, but basically you're going to get punished for wheel flicking more often. So we'll see how that translates in the final product. We've recalibrated wear rates for each tyre compound with track-specific details playing a larger role. This, along with a better balance for alternative strategies at 50% races, should allow for more variation when planning a one-stop or two-stop race, which, in a nutshell, I just hope that means that the hard tyre isn't as consistent and as durable, and that the soft and the medium, especially the soft, are a bit more of an option. So basically we can run with all three compounds and not be restricted to basically a hard medium or a medium hard, which is basically the case for every single league race bar Silverstone and I think Spa. So yeah, hopefully they've done some work there. They've also made improvements to how tyres react to different ground material types such as grass and gravel. The grip level tweaks based on real-world race data have been changed, with street circuits typically offering less grip than traditional circuits. So hopefully Monaco, Singapore, Baku should be slower, especially Monaco and Singapore. But yeah, it seems like basically if you touch the grass or the gravel, that's going to have a bit more of an effect and a bit more, I'd say, more than a direct effect in terms of gravity, a more effect in terms of duration. So it's going to take a bit longer to clean your tyres up and get back up to pace. And then we have stuff regarding power unit. The clutch model has been revised with improved slip and blending for smoother shifting overall. This is most noticeable when using automatic gears, so auto gear users, that one's for you. The throttle mapping has been revised for smoother torque response, especially at low speeds, so that could potentially mean a bit better traction. Plus, ERS has been recalibrated for deploy rates to allow for more strategic harvesting at high speeds. Again, that's one of them ones where you take their word for it, but until you put it into practice and actually race some AI and do some, league racing and stuff, we're not really going to find out how that truly works. But it's nice to see they've basically addressed everything. Now, interestingly, it says when it comes to aero, the slipstream model has been changed to improve racing. They've essentially increased dirty air compared to F1 24, although they do say that basically every year, and I don't even think dirty air exists. The accuracy of ride height and yaw effects, which I believe is either side-to-side roll or front-to-back roll when you're braking accelerating, has been adapted based on real-world CFD and wind tunnel data. So again, it's one of them ones where it sounds very good on paper, but let's see it in practice. Again, when we get the preview build, the early access in May, and we actually get to do some proper content, I can't wait to really dissect this and delve into it in detail. And then we go to AI enhancements. So we know that when playing offline, the AI drivers should feel as thrilling and exciting as it does when racing or watching the real life sport. Following trials in pre-release testing with highly skilled players resulted in some incredible racing action. The team tuned the AI to better reflect their overtaking capabilities with one another and when racing players. Now I'm going to pause here and say, Arava did a video the other day. He got, I believe, an hour of hands-on, and he spoke about the handling, in a video. And he still said the jury's still out, and he's not too sure about these changes. So we're going to take this with a grain of salt. Other adjustments have been made, such as AI now being more likely to pull off defensive maneuvers when protecting a position, which, to be fair, Arav did specifically point this out as an example, so that's something they have worked on, and he did mention. You also may notice trains form, just like in the real life sport, but the AI will make better tactical decisions as to when to deploy DRS and ERS. So it seems like the trains are still a thing. They're not going to try and, shy away from that or admit they fixed it, but they're hoping they've retrained them so that they use their tools, DRS and ERS, a bit more effectively, which, again, until we get on track and find out, we won't know, because let's be honest, I know I do, and other of you guys who watch this video have the beta, but the beta is a very old build. So what we might test in May, which is going to be like the preview version, will be a significantly advanced version. So that's when we're going to really find out the state of play of this year's game regarding AI and handling. And then finally, we have some quick fire changes, very, very minimal. The first one is a dead point, nothing to mention except for just basically recapping what's new. It says when going off track, picking up grass and gravel or other off-track surfaces is more visually pronounced on the tyres. And it says, as in previous games, the pickup can hinder your ability to grip to the surface of the track until it's worn off, so be careful. Again, I think they're hinting at this with what we saw before. gravel, grass is going to basically take a bit longer to clean off your tires and will play a larger role if you make mistakes. We have podium sequences that have been reworked, which we see in the trailer. Also, they give some credit to NVIDIA audio to face to basically give more realism to the characters in career, in Breaking Point. So there's that. That also kind of ties into the improved audio samples this year, which they've of course duplicated. And then in my team, the engine sound your car makes matches that of the engine supplier you choose, which I feel like wasn't that the case in F124? You know, that's something really obvious, unless I'm not understanding what they're trying to say. Or if F124 had a generic sound for all cars regardless of whatever engine supply you chose, which to be fair, if that's the case, I never even noticed. And they've also updated the rules such as the Monaco 2-stop and also removing the point for the fastest lap. So that's the article. And the latter half is much more interesting than the first half, because the first half focuses on everything that we're now going to see in the trailer. Right, we're going to run the trailer at 1 times speed and we'll pause when I notice things that are worth pointing out. So, for the majority of the trailer, we're going to get visual shots of the updated circuits and also little visual changes, like for example, you can see on the cars here the kind of oil smoke that runs off the back. Just a few small details, like for example here, this is Australia turn 5. Again, Australia has been changed, as we know. This particular corner, even with the new layout in F122, 3, 4, had this barrier in its original position, which is far away with grass on the outside of the track. Now, the barrier is right there on the edge of the curb, so a bit like a street circuit, or Monaco or Baku, I've run off at this corner countless times onto the grass. Now there's a barrier, so there's actual jeopardy. I believe LiDAR is like 95 or 97% accurate. It's not laser scanning, which is I think 99.9%, but you guys can correct me in the comments on the the values of how accurate LiDAR is versus laser. But yeah, they get all the data you can see here of the track, the paddock, everything, and then just import that into the game. Now this is where they're going to showcase one of the changes. So you can see here you've got kind of the paddock tents on the inside and the outside, the car park at Bahrain. This is pretty significant, okay? This is a big change, how it really does evolve, okay? All the paddock areas here. I will note, in the trailer, because we have the audio muted, they do talk about interviews returning as like a cutscene for Breaking Point and My Team. So, again, those will have a knock-on effect in terms of how your My Team career goes.
From career to Breaking Point, the reintroduced press interviews now capture drivers delivering their responses in a more authentic fashion, with this technology also extending to facility heads in My Team.
And I hope some of these paddock areas or vistas are part of the reason why we're getting that revamp. So basically we can get interviewed in these areas, because look at all the crowd here, heading down the paddock here at Bahrain. So I do hope we do get some of that in those interview vistas. Anyway, that's the updated Bahrain. Let's talk about a few other tracks. Here's that barrier that I'm talking about at turn 5. It's right there on the edge of the curb. So if you run a bit wide, get some dirty air or understeer, you're going to be hitting the wall. So that's going to be a costly error. Here's a bit of a preview of the way, which frankly looks the same as F124, I'm not going to lie. Foliage. They're going to talk about the cherry blossoms at Suzuka, which again is not really important, but you can see how they look in game. I'm kind of looking at the tarmac and the track surface to see how that changes. You can see how the curb in 25 is a lot narrower now than 24, and we'll see how those curbs behave, because historically they've been pretty much untouchable to go over when you're driving them. So we'll see how that translates in game. But yeah, Imola showcasing the new tracks. Baku, still the same circuit. In this case, they're talking about the path tracing, which we mentioned before is highly unlikely, anybody can run. But it is a nice change. It's just, do you have the PC to run it? Because it's only available on PC and that's it, right? So yeah, we're going to get into the decal editor. Now, it mentioned before about these, preset base liveries where you basically just change the sponsors, or you're going to get special sponsor liveries, essentially where you sell yourself out to that sponsor and they make a custom livery of their own. Now, you can see here, I believe this entire livery is a custom livery for the sponsor Aperture, or Aperture, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. Either way, this is a preset livery. I'm guessing you can't really change the colors, and all you can do is really change the sponsor arrangement of the secondary sponsors around. So Loop, Phoenician, Echo, Achevet, AI, Esther Perpetua. You get the idea. Okay, I'm guessing that's how that's going to change in this year's game. This livery belongs to Alkanies or Alkanus Energy, so that's their preset livery in game, and all you can do is basically readjust sponsors and then kind of put them in that kind of slant, like you can see here, Vacanziero, Polar, Tools, Moon. Basically put them in the gaps. As you can see with Satellite as well, they're going to just rotate it so it fits into the livery's design. So I get the feeling this is slightly more limited than what we first were shown or thought to believe. So I'm just going to kind of be cautious for now in regards to my expectations to the customization of the decal editor for the cars. Now this is exciting. This is interesting. And we go back to the article before and how they have to remap everything. For example, the safety car. They have to retrain the safety car and it has to be at the other side of the pit lane. It has to leave the pit lane. They've also flipped the pit boxes. So Sauber is now at the end, which would have been the first in the regular direction. There's a lot to reprogram, right? And you can see here how they've repositioned the brake marker board. So into turn 2, you've got the 50 before the chicane. You can see Austria, you're actually starting a downhill, which is quite interesting. And they've also flipped the DRS, Zandvoort banking. Quite a cool experience. Again, we'll see. This is actually the interview pen, which this is the exact point of the trailer where they mentioned the interviews are back in the game for my team and Breaking Point. So if it's maybe got a bit of a broadcast feel with the name, number, team name, you know, the graphic on screen, that would be a nice little touch to add to that, to be fair. But, you know, we'll see, because I do think that adds a touch. It's a shame they basically invest so much, as we saw with the Bahrain clip, into these paddock environments, and they don't use them. You know, like if you go back to, and I wanted to make a video about this, but it's so tough to make, to collate all the clips. But if you go back to F1 2015, 16, 17, 18, all the different paddock environments, you know, and interviews and cutscenes that we get, and they've all disappeared over the years. They've gotten rid of all of them. So, you know, it'd be cool to see these back. I will quickly say there is one thing I want to comment, and that is regarding the confirmed driver list for the icons. I just want to say it's very poor. In a game mode, my team, where you can't drive as yourself no more, and you're justifying controlling 2 drivers, we should be given way more options. They've gotten rid of a lot of drivers, and we have a very limited list. Now, Arav made a good point yesterday talking about this. They've probably paid Lewis Hamilton an absolute bag to be the cover star, so they've had to basically cut out, you know, certain drivers who might have been asking for a bit too much money. But no Perez, no Magnussen, no Kobayashi, no Montoya, and, you know, I'd go one further really. Certain reserve drivers, I mean, Aston Martin have Van Dorn, you know, Mercedes have Vesti. It goes on, the list goes on. Ferrari got Giovinazzi, right? They're assets which have been in the game in the past, so I don't see why they couldn't just bring them back. But, you know, that's a topic for another time. Either way, you can see the driver list on screen. It's quite disappointing. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. Like and subscribe. And yeah, that's another deep dive out the way. I think we've got one more, possibly 2 more to go. And there's going to be a lot of content, guys, arriving soon regarding the early access. So tune in, subscribe to the channel to not miss out on that content when it does drop on my end. I'll be testing everything regarding the handling and the AI, so stay tuned. But yeah, like the video. As always, a massive, you know, shout out to my channel members for supporting all the content. Check out the 2 videos on screen, including the previous deep dive breakdown, and I'll see you guys in my next one very soon.